Hey everyone, it's Melanie from melaniekham.com. Welcome back to my channel. We are going to be making this pot holder today as part of the Learn to Sew series. All right everyone, let's make our hot pads. This is what you need. Here are our 4 layers. So we have our background, and notice I am reusing several other fabrics from the Learn to Sew series. So, feel free to use scraps. I even use some smaller scraps to make a piece that I could use. So, get creative with this. You don't need to go out and buy fabric necessarily, but if you don't have big enough pieces, you might need to, but they're pretty small. So 11-inch background. You need another 11-inch piece of batting, just regular batting. This is great for batting scraps if you are a quilter like me. And then you need one of these, the heat-resistant batting layer. And you can find this in the interfacing section of your local Joann. I will put a link to the specific name. I think it's called Therma something or other, I can't remember. It's made by Pellon though, I'll have the link. And then your top layer of fabric is 10 inches, and we'll go over why there's a difference in the sizes in just a second. The other thing that you need is some 3.5-inch strips for our binding. That's gonna be this outer piece. Now this one is a little bit wider than this one when I was making these samples. This one is a lot easier to do because we have that additional layer in the middle. This is what the size I typically do for quilts. And it was a little tricky to get it all the way around. I feel like it'd be a little harder for beginners. So I bumped up the size, and this is a fat quarter. So 1 fat quarter was enough to make this one, and I've got enough left over for a second one. So the first thing we do is make our sandwich, our little quilt sandwich. This is kind of like making a little mini quilt. So we have our background piece. Then I'm gonna put the batting layer. It doesn't really matter. The batting layers can be reversed. Then our heat resistant, I'm actually gonna put this with that kind of metal side down. It's not really metal. You can totally sew through it, but I don't want it to act funny under my machine. So we're gonna put that in the middle. And then here's our top piece. Put that on top, and that should be smaller than your background pieces, and that is to allow for shifting. So I'm gonna show you how to do this without a walking foot. A walking foot will make this project a lot easier, but I don't want you to have to go out and buy a walking foot to be able to do this project. So we're just gonna allow for all the shifting that will happen when you use a standard foot, and then we'll trim around at the end. So then I'm just gonna take some large safety pins, pin all those layers together. If you are a beginner, an all over print or a solid color is going to be best, especially for beginners to use this project. So now let's head over to the sewing machine. Now, if you have a walking foot, looks like this, go ahead and install that on your machine and use that. The other foot that can be helpful is one of these, which is like a Teflon foot, and it has like a non-stick bottom. That can also be helpful. So if you have one of those, you could try that as well. I'm going to do it with just my standard foot because I just want to show you how to do it and what will happen if you use this standard foot and make it so that you guys don't need to go out and buy anything. So one of the things that you can do to help you, and this machine doesn't have a great way of doing it. I think it just sort of adjusts automatically. But a lot of machines will have like a knob or a dial either on the side of your machine or on the top, like a back dial on the back side. That is basically how much pressure the foot makes. So as it goes down. So if you have a very thin piece of fabric, you need it to go, be down pretty flat. If you have thicker fabrics, you can kind of have it hovering up a little higher. So look for that on your manual. The other thing you're gonna do is put your stitch length up. I went way up, like 3.5, because it's got a lot of layers to go through. And then the other thing is decide what you want to do for your stitching. So I'm gonna do the straight lines, this one, because I want to show you guys how to do that. I just love the way that it looks. But you could just do random squiggly lines. You could do whatever you want. So with the straight line, you're gonna just do one straight line going all the way down. I just eyeball it because that's how I roll. And I've got a coordinating thread color so that if it's got any mistakes or little things, you're not gonna see it. Remove any pins. Don't need to back stitch when you get to the end, just pull it off. Now I am going to move my needle position all the way to the right. I'm gonna line up the left side of my foot with the stitch I just made, and I'm gonna stitch down. So just try to check too sometimes that you have no wrinkles, pull on those bottom layers just to make sure. What the walking foot does is helps to guide all of these layers through evenly. So continue your quilting, whatever you're doing, for the entire top of your hot pad. All right, here's our piece. Look how much shifting happened. So if that's what happened to yours, that is a-okay. Look at, this is what happened with mine too. Look at that lovely texture. So we're gonna trim it up. And again, this is avoided a lot if you have a walking foot. Let's just trim this up. We want it to be a square. All right, now we are ready to put our binding on. So grab your binding strips, trim off any selvages like this, and then we're gonna sew them end to end. So 1/4 inch end to end to make one long strip. You want it to at least be able to go around all 4 sides. So if you have a different measurement or you didn't grab a fat quarter, you have scraps, just add up all 4 sides of your piece and add about another 6 or 7 inches just so we have enough extra wiggle room to do our join and our corners. Once we have our long strip, we want to press it wrong sides together like this. And when you get to those seams, press them open. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, we have our binding piece. We're gonna decide, which is your back and which is your front, because we're gonna sew it to the back first. So here's the back of my hot pad, and we are gonna line up the raw edges of our binding and the raw edges of our hot pad. I'm gonna leave a bit of a tail and then clip it. Okay, so let's sew it down. We're gonna sew it with a 3/8 seam allowance. So we've used that seam allowance before. Find that mark, and we are gonna leave a bit of a tail. See that tail? Because we need to join it, so we gotta have a little wiggle room to do that. And then we're gonna sew down. We have this here. Here's our raw edges. When we were coming down to the corner, we're gonna flip it to the right. And see, there's this diagonal fold that goes diagonally off of the corner into the hot pad here. So this diagonal fold, and you know that that's correct because the raw edge of the binding and the raw edge of the hot pad line up. Then you flip it back on itself with the fold lining up here. Raw edges lined up here. Then we flip this down to get it out of the way. And now you'll feel the fold here going diagonally. So we're gonna sew down to where that fold is here. Then you're gonna backstitch. Take it off. Then we're gonna put it back down here on the hot pad. We've got our fold here at the top. And starting from that fold, we're gonna sew all the way down with our 3/8 seam allowance again. We're gonna pull our binding to the right. Here's that fold going diagonally across. Raw edges lined up with raw edges. Then flip the binding back on itself. Now these raw edges are lined up with the diagonal line. Then we'll pull that down, we're just getting it out of the way. And we're gonna sew down till we hit that fold underneath. You can feel it with your fingers. You can make a little mark if you need to, until we hit that fold, and then we're gonna backstitch. Okay, backstitch. And pull it off. Okay, so we just pulled that off here. We're gonna rotate, flip that binding up, starting from the fold, make the 3/8 line, back stitching at the beginning. So continue that all the way down and then we will do our join. Okay, I am getting back around where I'm gonna need to do my join. So we're gonna come off of that corner, we're gonna do a few stitches down and then back stitch a few and then pull it off and let's go over to the work table. Okay, so here is how joining it works. We need to put another seam here. It might mean you've got to back stitch a little bit. It might mean you got to kind of work with things. Okay, so I'm gonna cut the excess off. And I'm actually gonna pull out because my stitch is up here a little bit too much, so it's gonna be tricky to get that join. So I need to pull a few of these out. Now I've layered them on top of each other and they need to be overlapped by 1/4 of an inch or whatever your seam allowance is gonna be. I eyeball this because I've been doing this for a long time, so I feel really confident in my sizing skills, but you can also use a ruler and measure 1/4 of an inch and make a mark so that you know for sure. See, they're overlapped by about 1/4 of an inch. So now we need to open it up. This is why we need to have a little wiggle room, because then we're gonna place our right sides together. We're gonna kind of fold this up, and then we are gonna send this through the sewing machine. All right, so no need to get it from the machine. I'm just gonna finger press this seam open, fold it in on itself. Should lay pretty flat, hopefully. And then you're gonna start where you left off and then go down, back stitching on both ends just to make sure that everything is super secure. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is trim off a little bit of these corners. See right here where that stitch is, don't get that, but it really helps to reduce a little bit of the bulk when we're trying to get those nice corners. So I just sort of shave off about half, just right in that corner spot. I want you to press this so that it lays really flat. So now we flip it over, and then this is where I want you to clip it. So these clover clips that I had on your supply list are really great for this. So when we pull it over, make sure you're covering up that stitch from the first round that we did. So go ahead and make sure that it's kind of all the way over. It's a snug fit without being tight. We don't want anything curling. And then I also like to go ahead and do my corners here at the work table. And then you're gonna flip this over. So it's gonna kind of happen naturally. You're gonna see it form. So you fold it. So this is what we want. We want that nice fold happening so that these two edges meet. So you see that? And then you can just clip that into place. Let's head to the sewing machine. All right, let's get our binding sewn to the front. No, you're not crazy. My nail color did change. I forgot to hit record last time I did this, and then I had to leave for my nail appointment and then come home and redo it. So here we go. Second time's a charm, but you are not crazy. Okay, so we are on the binding. I am gonna line up the edge of the binding, and I'm gonna get a couple different angles, so don't worry, with where the metal meets the plastic here on my presser foot. I also have my needle position over pretty close to the left side, and I've got a nice yellow thread, so you guys will be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Stitch length at a 3.5, and we're gonna get started. I've got yellow in the front, and then I've got a gray as my background thread. My bobbin thread is gray. It's gonna just blend right into this. Back stitch, just a few. And then we're gonna run that all the way down, and then I'll show you up close when we get to the corner. Go down, and then when the needle, I'm actually gonna put my needle in the down position. If you have that option, that's really helpful. We're just gonna go down until that needle comes onto this side. I'm getting nice and close so I can see that needle just went down on this side. Lift up our presser foot, we'll pivot it around, and it's gonna be right in the exact spot that it should be. Here's how it's looking over here. Normally I'd probably do like a green or a teal to blend in a little bit more, but the yellow doesn't look bad, and I want you guys to be able to see it. Just go nice and slow until I see it up onto where it will catch the other side. Pivot. And that's all there is to that binding. Pretty easy, right? Okay, we're coming back around. So once we get back to the back stitch that we did initially, we're gonna do the same thing. There's where that back stitch is, and then here's the back. So I designed it so that you have it kind of going a little bit bigger on the front so that we're not having any of that stitch kind of come up onto the back of our binding. There you have it. Trim up your threads and you have got a great new hot pad.